This is the iPhone 17, not the Pro, just the regular iPhone 17. And for the first time, this seems to have gotten more of an upgrade over last year than the Pro did over last year's 16 Pro. And I think that means that this makes the iPhone 17 the better purchase for most people. You see, in previous years, Apple always really neutered the base model just enough to encourage people to buy the Pro models. But this year, the iPhone 17 and iPhone 17 Pro, there isn't really that much of a difference anymore. This year, the base model, in my opinion, is actually really good. And while there are some upgrades that you get with the Pro model, I would argue that most users would never be able to tell. So, like I said, this year, more than any year in the past, I think most users should consider purchasing the iPhone 17 base model over any other iPhones out there. There are a lot of major improvements and some new features added this year, as well as some things that even make the iPhone 17 better than the iPhone 17 Pro. We'll go over all of that in this video, as well as, of course, I'll mention a few drawbacks, but overall, now that this has been out for a few weeks, I'm really happy with the iPhone 17. So I promise, by the way, I will share some sample photos to compare against the iPhone 17 Pro later in this video, but let's start off with just the upgrades. What's new? What's given to the iPhone 17 this year that in the past was really reserved for the Pro models or otherwise just didn't exist on the iPhone 16? The first few are really related to the display. One is that instead of having a 60 Hz refresh rate, which we've been stuck with for many years on the base model, they finally upgraded to the faster, smoother 120 Hz. And if you've never used this in the past, you might say, what's the big deal? But after you use them side by side, there really is a significant difference. They also added an always-on display, so I'll get some B-roll to show you, but essentially, you can see the time, you can see your notifications, even when your phone is off and sitting over to the side. Of course, if you don't want to, you could always disable that. And if you don't want to show notifications when you're not looking at it, you can also disable that. But again, it's a nice feature that in the past was always reserved for just the Pro model. There's also a higher peak brightness on here, so it's more usable outside in a bright day. And the glass on the front is stronger and more scratch resistant than before, making this a more durable phone. So from a display standpoint, there's really not much of a difference between the two phones anymore. Apple did a really good job upgrading the 17 to make it on par with a lot of really high-end phones this year. Inside, we have the A19 chip, which is not the A19 Pro you see on the iPhone 17 Pro. And I know the numbers are confusing. The A19 is in the iPhone 17, so I'll just call them by the phone. So the iPhone 17 processor is actually outperforming the iPhone 16 Pro processor from last year, which I think is very impressive considering this is the base model. So Apple's not really holding back that much on there. I'll talk more about the processors later in the video, but you get double the base storage now compared to last year. Last year was 128 gigabytes. Now it starts at 256 gigabytes. And the display, because we no longer have the base model and the Plus, we just have the iPhone 17, it's now 6.3 inches instead of 6.1 as it was last year. And most of that reduction is really in the bezels. There's slimmer bezels all the way around, which I think looks quite nice on here and feels more premium. The battery life is also improved. 30 hours per charge on average is what Apple's claiming, compared to 22 hours last year. Now, the Pro does still get a slightly longer battery, and I'll talk about that later. But again, I think it's really subtle, and I don't think it's necessarily worth the upgrade just for that. In the past, the 16 Pro was a titanium build. Now, these are both aluminum. And aluminum is nice because it's light, but it's a very soft metal, which means it's very easy to scratch. If you're dropping either one of these phones, it's very likely you could damage them, which is why I highly recommend you get a case from channel sponsor Mous. And I'm not just saying that because it's a sponsored segment. I've really been using Mous cases for a long time. They're extremely durable and very well engineered. You might have seen their ads where they just throw the phone like 20 feet in the air, it lands on any side, and it's pretty much always okay. If you look at the cases, they have several different designs. My favorite is the Limitless, which if you look at this case, like it's a very slim and pocketable case, and yet it has raised edges all the way around to protect your display on the front, so if you land, you're not going to scratch it. And the camera control button, which is really difficult for cases to design, actually functions so well on here. In fact, when I first tried it, I told the Mous team that, to me, it felt better than the native camera control button on the actual iPhone. Like, it just feels so smooth, and it's really well executed here. They also have several different case designs, like I said, besides the Limitless. They do have a clear case, which there's two options. There's a MagSafe one, or there's just a full clear back one if you want to put like a photo back there, for example. And the clarity cases will absolutely never turn yellow, which is great. There's also the super thin case, as well as several others linked down below if you want to check those out. They're all super well engineered, and if you get the ones besides the clear case that doesn't have MagSafe, all the other ones have MagSafe, and the MagSafe, I would argue, actually works better because while you still have the same magnet there, it's actually a higher friction surface, so wallets and things like that should be sticking much better on here. So thanks to Mous, again, for always sponsoring the channel, and I mean, I use them all the time. I highly recommend them. And I'll tell you guys a really sad story in another video about I shattered my iPhone Air, like the day the cases arrived. I didn't put it on yet, so I'll talk about that later. And probably what I'm most surprised that Apple actually gave to the iPhone 17 as well as the Pro, but like not just the Pro, is the front-facing camera improvement. So last year, it was a 12 megapixel camera, similar to what you've been used to on pretty much any phone ever, where if you want to film portrait, you hold your phone upright. You want to film landscape, you obviously hold your phone sideways. But now they're using a square sensor, essentially what's called open gate in the industry, and open gate allows you to film either vertical or horizontal by cropping in on that square. And that means that you can hold your phone upright, and just by holding it upright, you can take a wide angle shot of all your friends behind you, or you can film a portrait video if you wanted to. Really a lot you can do with that, which feels like a very pro feature to me. And it's cool that Apple did give that to the base model right here. And that feature also unlocks a lot of other sub features within there. One is center stage, because we have such a wide angle camera facing us, we can use center stage or center stage for video, which means if you're on like a FaceTime call, you can move around, it'll zoom in on you and kind of reframe according to where you are standing in front of the camera. You also have ultra stabilized video, and we now have dual capture, another feature that feels like it would really be focused on the Pro, but is available on the 17 base model as well. The dual capture meaning that you're able to film what you're seeing and what's behind the camera side by side, kind of like if you've used a Be Real app. It's very similar to that, but you can film or take photos in that format all the time on this phone. And then we also have some pretty significant improvements to the rear cameras that bring this pretty much on par with the Pro cameras. So the rear camera last year was 48 megapixels for the main shooter on both the base and the Pro model, but the ultra wide was 48 megapixels on the Pro model and only 12 megapixels on the iPhone 16 base model. This year, that's been bumped up to 48 megapixels to match the iPhone 17 Pro, so 48 megapixels on both of them. And the only one you're going to be missing, of course, is the telephoto lens, which is significant, and I'll talk about that more in a camera test in a minute. But the main sensor, it's also worth noting, although they are both 48 megapixels, according to sources I read, the sensor is smaller. So again, I'll explain what smaller sensor means in a minute as far as how your photos are going to look. But again, I think most users probably won't notice that difference. As far as the price goes, there was a little price bump on the iPhone 17 this year, but kind of not really. Like last year, it started at $699. This year, it starts at $799. But if you looked at last year, the base model that upgraded the storage to 256, which this is now 256 gigs starting, then it was about $799. It was really similar in price. That's still $300 cheaper than the Pro, which starts at $1,099. So $1,100 versus $800. The difference is, I think, are getting slimmer and slimmer. Now let's get back to the differences between the iPhone 17 and the 17 Pro. Now I want to shift focus here to what the iPhone 17 Pro actually does better, because it is still a more expensive phone. It is still the Pro phone, and Apple did add some things here that make it a better phone. But how is it actually a better phone? And is it going to be better for everybody? I mean, Pro is in the name, and I would argue that most of the upgrades are going to be for more professional users. So one, they do add a ceramic shield on the back, but not really the whole back. Like if you can look at this, you'll see there's aluminum and there's ceramic shield kind of mixed together. Like I said, if you're putting a case on here, that doesn't much matter anyway. The chip on the inside, as I mentioned earlier, is the A19 Pro versus just the basic A19, which also adds one extra core to the GPU, which should mean that processing videos or playing games should be a little bit faster on the iPhone 17 Pro. And the battery is 33 hours versus 30 hours. So as I mentioned before, the extra 3 hours of battery in here could be significant for some users, and maybe that's like a nice little icing on the cake if you upgrade. But I think a lot of people wouldn't really notice that difference in the battery life, and you can change settings pretty easily to, for example, just turn off always on display and really change your battery life like that. Obviously, the biggest upgrade that I think probably the only one that everybody would notice would be the addition of the 48 megapixel telephoto lens, which is a really high quality lens. And as a content creator, it's something that I definitely appreciate a lot. But getting into the weeds on some more niche things that are definitely very pro focused, one is the USB Type-C. This is 3.0 versus 2.0, which gives you significantly faster wired data transfer. So if you have like half a terabyte of video and you're trying to, send that over to a laptop, rather than airdropping all of it, you can use a wire and it's going to transfer, I think, 20 times faster. But again, I don't think most users, ask yourself, when was the last time you plugged in your iPhone to transfer photos and were unhappy with the speed at which files were sent? I think most people probably never do that. This also, of course, the 17 Pro, talking about transferring things fast. It also has more storage. So the base model is the same. They both have 256 gigs. They have a 512 option, but only the Pro has a 1 terabyte option. So if you need a terabyte of storage, again, you're probably a Pro user anyway, and the Pro makes sense for you. Also, if you're really pushing the phone, you're exporting videos, you're playing a lot of games, you really have to be pushing this phone to notice this. There's a better cooling system on the Pro, of course, also tied in with the slightly faster chip there that is going to make that more performant, especially for sustained performance. And getting back to that main primary rear sensor, I mentioned that the Pro had a larger sensor according to sources I read, and that really just means that you're going to have marginally better low light performance. Of course, they both have essentially the same processing pipeline, so you're getting a great night photo in either one. But if you're really trying to take like a star photo, I would expect that to be slightly better on the Pro, and you should be getting slightly better natural bokeh. So if you take a photo of something up close, you know how the background gets blurry even when you're not in portrait mode? That's something that the Pro should be doing a little bit better. And if you look at the back, you'll see that little dark circle on the bottom right of the camera cluster. That's LiDAR. That's going to be helping with focusing, or if you're trying to do like 3D room mapping, again, more of like a kind of industrial application there. But if that's something you're doing, that could be useful to have LiDAR on there for slightly better focusing and things like that. We also have more or larger studio mics or studio quality mics, as Apple calls them, on the Pro. So audio would be, slightly better if you're using the Pro phone versus the base phone. And probably the last main difference is the RAM. You have 12 gigs of RAM on the Pro versus 8 gigs on the base model. So looking at these photos, you can see the iPhone 17 really does quite a good job in pretty much every situation. I've taken a ton of photos, both zoomed in. When you zoom in though, one thing to note is that while you can go from ultra wide to 1x to 2x, the max you can get is 10x for photos, and for videos, you can only zoom in up to 6x. So that's really going to be the only main difference I've noticed. As far as like I said, I saw some claims saying that the sensor size was smaller on the iPhone 17. Apple doesn't actually publish the sizes of the sensors, but when looking at the photos, you could see I don't really see any meaningful difference here. Like the low light photo, I think looks identical in both of them. I don't see any extra detail in the Pro. And also when you're looking at bokeh, so kind of the macro shots where you don't switch to a macro mode with the ultra wide, but just using the primary lens, I don't see any difference in the bokeh. I really think these sensors appear to be absolutely identical. The only difference between the base model and the Pro, as far as I can tell in photos and videos, is going to be the lack of the telephoto lens in the base model. But if you really look at it, for the first time in years, the only real noticeable difference to the average everyday user is probably just going to be the telephoto lens. I think that the other ones are fantastic upgrades, and I really love that Apple added very pro-centric features to the Pro model, and I think that makes sense. Like if you're using those, you're definitely an edge case. You're a user that's a power user. You're doing it probably for some type of work, some type of business. Maybe you are, a photographer and you just have this as like your backup, camera in case your camera dies. You just want some easy shots in the moment. But I think for everyone else, those features might be pretty invisible. You might not notice them, again, aside from that telephoto lens on there. Also, the base model I mentioned in some ways was even better than the Pro. The main way that I would note is that it is a lighter phone. You're looking at 177 grams versus 206 grams, which sounds subtle, but that's enough of a difference that you can definitely feel it in your hand. And if this is in your pocket all the time, a lighter phone could definitely be a pretty big advantage. And on top of that, because the camera cluster is a little bit smaller and over on the left side, you have less space that's exposed when you have a case on the back, which means your phone should be even more protected when you're using a case compared to the iPhone 17 Pro, which again has a larger space that something could impact that in the middle. So kind of summarizing those differences, if you're using your phone for business tasks such as filming videos or something like that, obviously get the Pro. But for everybody else out there, I would say only get the Pro if money's truly no object and if you really care about that telephoto lens and really zooming in. I think most people otherwise would really enjoy the base model. Apple did a great job this year, and the iPhone 17 is extremely easy to recommend. But let me know in the comments below what you think about these phones and what you'd like to see Apple add to the base model iPhone 17. Thanks for watching. I'm Mike O'Brien, and I'm making more videos about the iPhones. If you want to see a full lineup comparison, be sure to subscribe.